Hi, everybody. We're excited to let you know that we're adding an incredible new show to the CyberWire podcast network. It's Microsoft's Security Unlocked, CISO series with Brett Arsenault. Listen in as Microsoft's Chief Information Security Officer, Brett Arsenault, talks one-on-one with the industry's leading CISOs, as well as technology leaders at Microsoft. In each episode, Brett and his guests will dive into the biggest challenges in cybersecurity, sharing new ideas and perspectives, and provide practical guidance based on the actual strategies implemented by Microsoft and Microsoft's biggest customers. You're not going to want to miss this one. Check it out on our website at thecyberwire.com/CISO. That's thecyberwire.com/CISO. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. A big welcome to Microsoft to the CyberWire Podcast Network. And now, a message from our sponsor, CyberReason. If you're a defender fighting to protect your organization from cyber attackers, you must be successful ending attacks every single time. They only need to be successful once. CyberReason reverses the attacker's advantage. Their future-ready attack platform gives defenders the wisdom to uncover, understand, and piece together multiple threats, and the precision focus to end cyber attacks instantly. Learn more at cyberreason.com. Japan calls out China for cyberespionage. Colonial Pipeline restores service as organizations look to their own vulnerability to ransomware. The DarkSide gang may have said it's going out of business, but it's likely that they're either rebranding or absconding. Two other gangs are in business. Conti is hitting Irish health organizations, and Avaddon says it compromised insurer AXA. Rick Howard looks at new responsibilities for CISOs. Our guest is Samantha Madrid of Juniper Networks on establishing automation and security integrations seamlessly. And a spy gets 15 years in a U.S. prison. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, May 17th, 2021. Japan has publicly identified the Chinese government as responsible for recent cyber attacks, Nikkei Asia reports. It's an unusual move for Japan, which has normally been circumspect in its attributions of hostile activity in cyberspace. Japanese Police Chief Mitsuhiro Matsumoto officially identified China as responsible for an attack for which the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department filed a case on April 20th. According to Yahoo News, the suspect is a Chinese systems engineer who is also a member of the Chinese Communist Party. He's alleged to have participated in cyber attacks against JAXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and some 200 other Japanese companies and research institutions in 2016 and 2017. Z News reports that the suspect has now fled Japan. Japanese police were specific in their attribution. Quote, "It's highly likely that the PLA's Unit 61419, a strategic support unit operating from the Chinese city of Qingdao in Shandong province, was involved in the cyberespionage." End quote. China's government has dismissed the attribution with indignation. Quote, "China is firmly opposed to any country or institution using allegations of cyber attacks to throw mud at China," a foreign ministry representative said. The reliably Beijing-aligned Global Times asks if Japan is about to, quote, "fumble policy to behave like Australia in confronting China," end quote, which suggests that both Tokyo and Canberra are onto something. Colonial Pipeline tweeted Saturday that its service had returned to normal. The company's decision to pay the extortionists ransom has drawn generally adverse comment. Ironic, given that paying $5 million to DarkSide, the gang responsible, apparently didn't aid the recovery, which Colonial Pipeline had to do in the end from its own resources. Some, like the U.S. National Security Council's Ann Neuberger, expressed some sympathy for organizations caught in a tough spot. CNBC quoted her as saying, We recognize that victims of cyber attacks often face a very difficult situation, and they often have to just balance the cost-benefit when they have no choice with regards to paying a ransom. Colonial is a private company and will defer information regarding their decision on paying a ransom to them." End quote. This is not by any means an endorsement of giving in to extortionists. She pointed to the FBI's unambiguous advice against paying ransom. And overall, the consensus is with CISA, whose advice is summarized by Signal: paying the ransom isn't a good practice. Wired offers a long summary of the ways in which payment perpetuates a vicious cycle and fuels a bandit economy. The consensus is also that ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure are likely to be attempted again. An op-ed published by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation frames the incident as a warning that there's worse to come unless the major cyber powers can arrive at some international norms that would produce an effective arrangement in cyberspace. The New York Times, in a piece that accepts DarkSide's self-presentation as a group of apolitical criminals, argues that the incident should be assessed in terms of the vulnerabilities it exposed. The DarkSide ransomware gang, which has said that it lost control of both servers and at least some of the money it had extorted from victims, said late last week it was closing down, going out of business. The Wall Street Journal has an update on this particular going out of business announcement, and they note that cybercriminal gangs have been known to announce their ride into the sunset, only to reappear again after a decent interval, usually under a new name. So it could be, as Security Week puts it, that the DarkSide operators are running scared. It's also possible, as FireEye tweeted, that the hoods are simply taking advantage of an opportunity to abscond with their criminals' affiliates' money in an exit scam. That's happened before too, but it's a bit too early to tell exactly what's going on with them. It would be naive to think that the people behind the scam have retired, gone straight, or moved on to another criminal line. DarkSide isn't the only ransomware gang to make news. Ireland's health service executive has come under a ransomware attack that's interfered with scheduling care and that may, the Wall Street Journal reports, end up costing the public healthcare organization tens of millions of euros to remediate. The Irish Times says the country's Department of Health has also come under attack, probably by the same gang. Sources in the Irish government indicate that the victims do not intend to pay the ransom. Bleeping Computer identifies Conti as responsible. Conti's technique is usually to breach a network and move laterally until it obtains domain admin credentials. At that point, the operators use reflective DLL injection to deploy fileless ransomware payloads. Conti is described as a private ransomware as a service operation. It recruits hoods to deploy its malware in exchange for a share of any ransom the victims might be induced to pay. The Government of Ireland said in an official statement issued by the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, quote, "The HSE became aware of a significant ransomware attack on some of its systems overnight. The National Cybersecurity Center was informed of the issue and immediately activated its crisis response plan." Insurer AXA last week took a strong line about ransomware payments, saying that it would no longer cover them. Over the weekend, the underwriters' business units in Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and the Philippines were themselves hit by ransomware. Bleeping Computer reports that the Avaddon gang has claimed responsibility and says they've taken some 3 terabytes of sensitive data from the company's networks. Coincidentally or not, AXA was also subjected to some distributed denial of service activity. And finally, on Friday, Peter Zabinski-Debens, the former U.S. Army Special Forces officer convicted of spying for the Russians, was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment by the U.S. District Judge Claude Hilton. That's 2 years shy of the 17 years prosecutors had asked, but a lot more than the 5 years his defense attorneys had recommended. The case touched on all 4 of the traditional motivations for espionage expressed in the acronym MICE: M for money, I for ideology, C for compromise, and E for ego. Mr. Debens received a little bit of direct compensation of some monetary value, apparently not much, from the GRU, for information he provided them. He also had conceived a quasi-patriotic attachment to Russia, at least as far back as his days in ROTC at the University of Minnesota, characterizing himself as a loyal son of Russia. Whether that involved serving the Kremlin or freeing Russia from the Kremlin's boot apparently varied from time to time. According to the Army Times, Debbins wrote, quote, "I had a messianic vision for myself in Russia that I was going to free them from their oppressive government, so I was flattered when they reached out to me." End quote. He also said he was being blackmailed by the GRU, who were threatening to either expose him for same-sex attraction or kill him, or both, should he fail to play ball. The prosecutors said at the sentencing hearing that claims of extortion were news to them, that Mr. Debbins hadn't mentioned that to investigators. And finally, Mr. Debbins seemed to have felt a sense of ill use and injured merit that turned him against the United States Army. At any rate, it's an old story. Change Russia to His Majesty King George III and take out the same-sex attraction stuff, and it all could have been said by Benedict Arnold. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, stopping breaches with cloud-native network detection and response. Let's face it, cyber criminals have the upper hand, and the most advanced ones have already made it past your defenses. When advanced threats like SolarWinds Sunburst compromises your business, you need a strategy. Tune in to ExtraHop's session, Building a CISO Response Strategy to Advanced Threats, at the RSA Conference on May 19th, and learn real, applicable strategies to build resilience against advanced threats. Find session details and learn more about ExtraHop's presence at the 2021 RSA Conference at extrahop.com/RSAC21. That's extrahop.com/RSAC21. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. There is a tension that often occurs when configuring a data center. Focusing on agility helps make operations fast and productive, but a focus on security infrastructure can establish protected networks. This can create a type of seesaw effect as operators split their resources between these two priorities. Samantha Madrid is Vice President of Security Business and Strategy at Juniper Networks, and she joins us with insights on how intent-based networking can help put data centers in proper balance.
There are traditional data centers, and when people think of it, I think they think that of the centralized racks of servers, which most people think of when you think of data center. But there is an emerging model in distributed compute nodes deployed deep in a network and close to end users. And so when you think about what a data center is, all of this, in my view, is a data center. And so it's about really strengthening that posture and bridging both operational efficiencies with security. And I think the seesaw effect is really kind of shining a light on trade-off decisions that have been made in years past and teams being put in that position. And I think organizationally, companies need to think about security more holistically, taking the step back and thinking about what security needs to look like in terms of business outcomes. And I think that one of the challenges has been historically is decisions have been made in a very siloed way, meaning we see a problem, let's address that specific problem, instead of taking a step back and asking a very fundamental question, what is it we're trying to protect?
So then what is to be done here? What do you recommend?
So, I really recommend when you're kind of like with anything, whatever the security or initiative is, what is the business outcome you're trying to drive towards? And bringing in security at the start of that from the forefront. In terms of security specifically, I think we have to shy away from, as an industry, this brand bias, if I will be as bold to say, where I think a lot of times there's a level of comfort that gives way to a popularity contest about a lot of vendors with respect to security. And we're not making the actual security decisions, which in my view, what needs to happen is you need to have validated security efficacy. You need to understand and continuously monitor the ability to evolve with the threat landscape. What's the threat coverage? What's the catch rate? What's the false positive, false negative rate? Are you bringing security to every point of connection, from your gateways, between your servers, each application, and between data center locations and the workload itself? I mean, the goal at the end of the day of a security team should be to be able to expand their aperture to see and detect as much as they possibly can and know that false positives will cause a team to turn off protections because it then starts to impede the business outcome. So to me, one of the most important things is maintaining high-level efficacy and evaluating technologies and validating your proposed architectures against them versus what I personally see a lot of times, a popularity-driven decision based on a given vendor du jour.
That's Samantha Madrid from Juniper Networks. And now, a word from our sponsor, Verizon. Mitigate the risks and realize the benefits of digital transformation with the help of Verizon, a leader in cybersecurity managed and professional services for nearly 2 decades. From secure cloud computing solutions to advanced detection and response capabilities, Verizon helps secure data, networks, and infrastructure of many of the world's best-known organizations. Their annual Data Breach Investigations Report is considered the gold standard of cybercrime research. And Verizon's leadership in network, wireless, and IoT connectivity makes it uniquely capable of protecting the ever-expanding attack surface. Let Verizon help you optimize your defenses and achieve the maximum return on your security investments. Learn more at VerizonEnterprise.com/products/security. And joining me once again is Rick Howard. He is the CyberWire's Chief Security Officer and also our Chief Analyst. Rick, it's great to have you back.
Hey, Dave.
So on your CSO Perspectives podcast, which is over on the CyberWire's Pro side, you are on part 2 of a 3-part series on new CISO responsibilities. What do you have lined up for us this week?
Well, that's right, Dave. We are looking at potential new CISO tasks that have emerged in the last 5 years or so that have not traditionally been given to the CISO before. Like when I had my first CISO gig, over 10 years ago, I don't like to admit that number, okay? But I pretty much only had to worry about the firewall, the intrusion detection system, and the endpoint antivirus system.
There was a lot less to secure back then, right?
Yeah, it was a lot easier, okay? But that was it, okay? That was all we had to worry about. But today, these modern CISOs, they have so many more things on their plate. They still have to do all the things that I had to do, a decade ago. But they also have securing internal data centers and mobile endpoints and multiple clouds. And that's not even including the OT environments and the supply chain that have been in the news of these last few weeks. So last week, we indeed took a look at operational technology and industrial control systems and whether or not the CISOs of the world have been formally given the responsibility to secure those environments. But in this week's show, we're talking about identity.
All right. Well, I like the sound of that. One of the things it strikes me that, identity is more complicated than it used to be. It used to be just user ID and password, but now with the hotness being zero trust, seems to me like it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, in the old days, identity was essentially managing user ID and passwords in Active Directory. And so that task generally fell to the CIO. But in today's complex environments, like you said, as we all try to implement this zero trust stuff, a robust, and I mean robust, identity management system is an essential first step. So the question we try to answer this week is, if that is true, and I think both of you and I think it is, if identity is the most important thing that CISOs have in their utility belt to build zero trust, shouldn't they own the responsibility to design it and maintain it?
Well, CSO Perspectives is in Season 5 over on the CyberWire Pro side, but you've also been releasing your Season 1 episodes to the public at the same time. What are you talking about there this week?
Yeah, we've been trying to give the general public a taste of what the CSO Perspectives podcast is all about in a brazen attempt to show everybody what they're missing on the pro side. And, right. And as you know, Dave, since you are an internet celebrity yourself, you don't come cheap, right? So we have to pay the bills somehow, right?
Yes. Okay.
And maybe my salary too. So, this week's episode is a fun one. We talk about what exactly is the dark web, and how does Tor, or the Onion Router, fit into it? And the fact that Tor started out as a U.S. Navy research project. And finally, we get to the meat of the matter, which is we address whether or not you should be paying commercial intelligence companies for intelligence products that focus on that world.
All right. Well, there's plenty to check out. We've got CSO Perspectives over on the pro side and earlier episodes from CSO Perspectives on our website, thecyberwire.com. Rick Howard, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible by RSA Conference, where the world talks security, happening this week. Through global events and year-round content, RSAC connects you to cybersecurity leaders and cutting-edge ideas for a safer, more secure future. Learn more at rsaconference.com/cyberwire21. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Puru Prakash, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.